Hey everybody, today before I get into the primary content of the video, I'm going to tie up a loose end real quick. Remember back when we were doing the flywheel work? Little link should be popping up right here right about now if you want to take a trip down memory lane. I did not install the pilot bearing, the race, or the seal because I did not yet have the seal. Well, I do have the seal. It's on the bench over here. Right here. So the one I decided to go with was a CR 10050. Specs on that real quick. I should also mention the cat number for that was a 1B1069. It's made for a 1-inch shaft and a 1.828 bore diameter, 1.832 seal OD, 1/4 inch wide. Now even at that 1.832, these have always been slightly loose in these retainers, considering these retainers are just stamped steel. They're not like a machined bore, so I always use a little bit of sealer around that OD just to kind of help to retain it. But I liked this 10050 seal. It's closed in on the backside. That's the closest match I could find to the good old full-bodied, fully closed in steel leather-lipped originals that they once used. But before I install any of the pieces, the first thing I'm going to do is take the grease gun and pre-fill that passage that feeds grease up to the pilot bearing, because when I had this flywheel disassembled and the ring gear off of it, I cleaned all of the old stuff out of there. There we go, got some grease coming out. So we've primed the pump, you could say. Now that washer that goes at the back can go in. I've pre-filled the channel with some grease, just trying to make sure everything starts out as full as possible. Next, the pilot bearing race can be driven in, and this chamfered edge right here leads it in. Pilot bearing goes in now, fully packed with grease. Now the first gasket. Followed by the separator plate. Then second gasket. And finally, the seal retainer. That should finish us up in here. Okay, now for the primary content portion of the video. We have this beyond awesome piece of technology right here. This is the crankcase breather / oil fill assembly, and you don't know it yet, but this thing is just gorgeous. Trust me, you'll probably hopefully gain an appreciation for how much cool factor is here by the end of the video. This is a hallmark indicator of a first model year Caterpillar D2, 1938 only. They had this style breather / filler. It's got some interesting pieces on. This whole tube that comes off the side was not originally on here. You're going to learn about that probably in the next video, but a lot of kind of engineering history right here. A lot of contrast between the old way of doing things and then the eventual new way of doing things. But so I mentioned this was only found on the first model year, 1938 model year D2s. This was used on tractors 5J1 through 5J1227. Now, considering that 1938 production ended at tractor number 5J1262, that means only the last 35 units produced in 1938 did not have this original style breather. So this is, like I said, a hallmark indicator of an early first model year D2 right here. It's kind of special just because of that. And to disassemble, fairly straightforward. We'll just take the cap off the top. This is what you would remove to fill the crankcase with oil. And I think this is kind of a pot metal style cap. It doesn't seem to be aluminum. You can see this one's starting to crack out a little bit. That's kind of typical of pot metal. Luckily, the beer can engine has the same breather on, and it's got a lot better cap. So the beer can engine might be saving us again. I might end up using the cap from that one. Got a little rubber seal underneath. Now this top piece threads off. It's kind of interesting. This top piece is bronze right here. That's going to thread off because the breather element is directly below that. Okay. So there, that piece comes out. You can see like a brass tube that goes down, threaded on the end. It's actually soldered inside the top piece, kind of the mushroom top piece. So just way cool. I mean, just the casting that went into this, the machining of this piece, soldering it together. That's just, I just like stuff like that. It's so cool. And here's the breather element right here. Has a seal beneath it. You can see very dirty on the top, but there's like a perforated filter section on the inside. Looks a lot better on the bottom, but again, another piece housing is stamped out of, looks like steel or tin. We might have a bit of a soldered joint down here, which joins it into the breather assembly. Now, we're going to put this in this catch pan here because it's got a drain plug on the bottom, so everything that settles out from that breather assembly is going to find its way down into the lower portion of this, and this would be drained off periodically. And I can already see there's something in there, so we'll take the plug out and make sure we get all that caught so we don't make a mess. There's chunks in there and looks like some water and some moisture. Pretty much standard when you're talking about the settle out portion of a breather. Okay, so with that drained, the last piece on here is this this long tube that goes up to the top. This was not originally on this breather, but it is all Caterpillar. This is part of a field installation upgrade that was put on this machine back in the day. You'll probably learn a little bit more, well, probably a lot more about that in the next episode. But you can see, being an add-on, it kind of captures this mounting bolt right here, at least with all the grease on there. I see somebody has kind of ground a point on the end of that. It makes it kind of a tight area to work. So let's take some of this grease off and see if that bolt will come out of there. But let's see if it'll just barely. No, I'm still not getting anything to happen. So maybe they put that grind on there to help start it without cross-threading easier because it's going to be captured. I don't know, but we'll get this. We gotta get this tube off here anyway. We'll get this tube out, and then that elbow out next. Kind of thought that fitting was going to spin on the tube, and I think it's supposed to. I think it's just stuck. Okay, I just found it. Here's the key. One of the flats on the head of the bolt has been filed down just enough that if you position that one flat next to that fitting, come on here, the bolt will come out. So that one flat being filed down in conjunction with the taper they ground on the end of it allows you to remove that. So I don't know if that was part of the field installation instruction or if that's just something that somebody did to make their own life a little easier. Either way, we got that part figured out right there. So that bolt is not completely captured anyhow. And I was going to remove that elbow, but now that I got that bolt out of there, I'm going to leave it, at least until I get this cleaned up and have a better look. I can tell, you guys might not be able to see it, you can see some of the threads sticking through in there. That is pipe thread, so it's already aligned to where it wants to be right now. So if I leave it alone, I won't have to replicate that. Hard to say if it's been leaking. There's so much of this dried on grease that, you know, who knows. These breathers just get grimy anyway. So I have a lot of cleaning up to do. That thing's just black on the inside. So yeah, just some nasty stuff in there. We'll get all these pieces cleaned up so we can get a better look at things and proceed from there. So here we are. this stuff looks a lot better now than it did a couple hours ago. Cleaned up pretty well. Happy with how everything looks. The breather element even cleaned up and looks pretty good. Man, I love this brass work on here. Just love that. That is just work of art. And the beer can engine gave us a filler cap that's not cracked. It's in a lot better condition. Made a new gasket out of some cork to go under there, so we'll get that set in place. That's good. And to replace the old dried up O-ring that used to be on the bottom side of the breather, I just had one in my selection here that's going to go in there and fit just fine. So that should give me a good seal down onto the base. Now for a quick rundown of how this works. Like I said before, it's a dual purpose unit. It's not only the oil fill, it's also the crankcase breather. So for the oil fill portion, we'll just leave the breather element out for now. It's easier to visualize. So the top piece with the brass pipe threads into the base like that, and that is where you pour the engine oil to fill the engine. So the oil goes down this pipe, down into the bottom of the housing right here, runs out this opening and down into the crankcase. And then of course you've got the oil fill cap. We'll seal that off on the top. So pretty simple. That's the oil fill part of this. Now for the breather portion of this. So our engine oil flows straight down the center hole to run out back here to go into the crankcase. But you can see I can stick my fingers up this back side and I'm right inside this back bump right back here. Can you see my fingers moving around up in there? That basically allows crankcase vapors to go up through the back side of this, enter into this space that surrounds where that pipe goes in, and feeds down into the lower reservoir portion right here. So this passage here is actually walled off from the lower reservoir at about a 45-degree angle. So vapors that are coming up from the crankcase into this area are going to want to rise. That's why the breather element fits on top of the housing. And of course it also surrounds the brass pipe that the oil is filled through. So when those vapors come from the crankcase, they will migrate up through this media that's inside of the breather element, and what that's going to do is allow everything to kind of cool down, everything to kind of separate. Any lighter vapors are still going to continue to come up out the top of this this breather can and basically come out around these fingers and just out from underneath this this brass top piece and vent out to the atmosphere. But any of the liquids that form will run back down through this media, drip out the bottom, and enter into this area here and collect down in the lower reservoir where they can be periodically drained off. And to assemble this, pretty straightforward. Place the new seal on the bottom of the breather can. Get that put on the base housing. Brass pipe with the top piece goes down, threads into the lower housing, and you just need to exert enough pressure upon the can to provide a positive seal at the base. Oil fill cap goes on the top. That seals that off, and for now we'll just loosely put the drain plug in the bottom. And that's all it takes to assemble that unit. So now that we've covered all of the details regarding this early filler slash breather, I'll show you what they replaced it with right at the tail end of 38. This piece right here. This is pretty much it. You can see the bolt pattern is the same, mounting area is the same between the two, and instead of all of this engineering awesomeness, this craftsmanship, this these really nice castings, they just had this piece. This is just an oil filler only. Just has a simple little hasp with a flip open lid on the top. That's where you would dump the oil into the engine. And that's basically the only function that this piece served. And being from 5J2115, that's what this one came off of. Somehow they found a way to break that filler pipe clean off. They've brazed it back on at one point. You can see the fracture line just in there. So we had all this awesomeness at one time. And then I don't know if the bean counters had their way or what, but we just replaced it with this kind of drab piece right here. And now the updated breather was just this simple assembly right here. We just have a like a stamped steel crimped together can. There's a bit of a media element inside of there. Vapors would come up that tube, enter into the can, and any excess would just vent out the bottom and exit out into the atmosphere. Well, being another 2115 piece right here, you can see, of course, they beat the heck out of this thing. I'm pretty sure that threw a track at one point in time and really damaged everything that was on the side of that engine. But we'll go over to 1113's block. I'll show you where these updated pieces ended up going. Now, this is the point where I remind everybody about the prior episode where I mentioned to keep this block off plate in mind. We'd be coming back to it. The link to that should be popping up here if you need to go refresh your memory. It's kind of interesting on these 1938s how they already had this provision built onto the end of the oil manifold, which gives you access to the crankcase. But in 38, they just blocked it off because they already had a breather built into their oil fill back here. The more interesting aspect is from 39 on, when they went to this updated breather, that's where that attached, right there. So did they build this into these oil manifolds with the intention of putting a breather there, but then they had this other supply of this earlier design that maybe they decided they were going to use up and basically until they got the new ones in, so they just put a block off here? Did they have something else in mind for this port? Because obviously they wouldn't have built it onto there just to cap it off. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The coincidence of that's where the new style breather ended up attaching. Kind of a chicken or the egg conundrum, what came first, you know? And then of course the drab looking updated filler just attaches back here. But fortunately for 1113, she never had the early style components here replaced with the more modernized designs, which did happen from time to time because they were all direct bolt-on replacements. Got our somewhat captured bolt started in here, gaskets in place. We'll just get this installed. Like I said before, that add-on field installation fitting makes this bolt a little bit of a trick to access down here. We'll just make sure we get it started first. This is where having really clean threads really makes life a lot easier because you can run it in the majority of the way by hand before you have to put a wrench on it. And what do you think? I mean, in my book, this is probably a lot better of a crankcase vent because it's actually a separator. You know, crankcase vapors carry with them byproducts of combustion, which include acids, tars, just all kinds, you know, varnishes, stuff like that. And the way you can just kind of let all that stuff separate off and collect in the bottom, drain it off from time to time, to me, that's a lot higher quality of a setup. Now, I can see how this was exponentially more expensive to produce than that other just kind of more drab, you know, cast and stamped out version, but it's hard to say. Did the bean counters get their way and end up winning the day and they went with those simpler components, or was it just deemed unnecessary to have all of this for this function? You know, could have went either way. Another way of looking at it too, this whole separator was probably only as effective as the person that was doing the maintenance on it, because if this lower plug was left in for long enough and the separated out fluids backed up to the point where it just eventually started rolling right back into the crankcase, then I guess all this was pretty much for nothing anyway. So yeah, it's really a special piece. I'm really glad this is on there. Just that's the cool factor for me. All these little differences that indicate what a earlier build machine is over a later one. So I'm going to leave the field installation tube off of this piece. I've got that over here on the bench yet. I did get that cleaned up. Sure enough, this bottom fitting did free up. It was just kind of rusted and stuck on there. Neat part of it, the breather that came off the beer can engine, 3J2219, has all the same field installation pieces on it, and kind of handy having this around for parts and pieces or spares should I need them. Still haven't ruled out taking all the old paint off this, polishing that brass up, and just seeing what that might look like on there. I don't know. That's, you know, idle talk. So anyway, we're going to leave this piece off. Like I said, we'll get into this in the next video. That's going to directly tie into what the main content of that is. Kind of had some fun today. I've been waiting for a while to get into some of these pieces and start bolting those onto the engine. So thanks for watching, everybody. Work is going to continue here. Please tune in again. All right. Senior is hammering right outside the door again. He always knows when I turn the camera on. See, he could sense that I was talking. Are we done? All right. No, I was just about to say, I think we're in the clear. There it goes again. Yep. Hit it again. Hit it again. Yeah, he must have got it.